A majestic horse, once cherished by a prestigious riding academy, collapsed in the brutal winter storm after a devastating injury, left to die in the merciless cold. A mysterious stranger, battling her own past traumas, discovered the freezing animal and did something that defied all logic and reason. What happened next would change not just their lives, but an entire community's understanding of healing and second chances. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. In the pristine hills of Vermont, where winter painted everything. In crystalline white, the Wellington Equestrian Academy stood as a beacon of excellence and privilege. Its towering wooden structures and heated indoor arenas represented generations of equestrian tradition, carefully maintained under the watchful eye of its owner, Catherine Wellington. At 62, Catherine had built her reputation on producing champion riders and horses, her methods as cold and unforgiving as the winter winds that howled outside her office windows. Among her prized possessions was Midnight Frost, a stunning black Frisian stallion whose powerful presence commanded attention in every competition. His flowing mane and tail, dark as midnight against the snow, had graced countless magazine covers and brought the Academy international recognition. Each of his victories added another golden trophy to Catherine's already impressive collection, his very existence a testament to her philosophy that perfection was the only acceptable standard. "He's worth more than most people make in a lifetime," Catherine often remarked to potential clients, her steel-grey hair pulled back in a severe bun that matched her rigid demeanor. Her words weren't just pride speaking. Midnight Frost had indeed cost a small fortune, and his competition wins had more than justified the investment. The horse's bloodline was impeccable, his training rigorous, and his performance record nearly flawless. That winter had been particularly harsh, with temperatures plummeting to record lows and snowstorms battering the Vermont countryside with unprecedented fury. The Academy's grounds, usually alive with the sound of hooves and training sessions, had grown quieter as many students retreated from the bitter cold. But Catherine Wellington didn't believe in letting weather interfere with excellence. On a particularly frigid morning, as the wind howled through the stable rafters, midnight, Frost was being prepared for an important training session. Despite the weather warnings and the concerns of her staff, Catherine insisted on maintaining the horse's strict training schedule. The indoor arena might have been heated, but the path there required crossing an expanse of ice-covered ground. "Ma'am," Marcus, the head trainer, had attempted to reason with her, his breath visible in the freezing air. "The conditions aren't safe. Even the most sure-footed horse could slip in this weather." His 20 years of experience spoke through his concerned eyes, but Catherine dismissed his warnings with a wave of her manicured hand. "Midnight Frost isn't just any horse," she replied, her voice as brittle as the icicles hanging from the stable roof. "Champions don't take days off because of a little snow. The national championships are in 3 months, and we have a reputation to maintain." The events that followed would haunt Marcus for years to come. As he led Midnight Frost across the frozen courtyard, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The horse's hooves, usually so confident and steady, found a patch of black ice hidden beneath a dusting of fresh snow. In an instant, the magnificent stallion lost his footing, his powerful legs splaying out beneath him as he crashed onto the unforgiving ground. The sound of his fall echoed through the winter air, followed by an agonized whinny that sent birds scattering from nearby trees. Marcus rushed to the horse's side, his heart pounding as he assessed the damage. Midnight Frost attempted to rise but collapsed again, his right front leg clearly injured from the fall. Catherine's reaction to the accident was not one of concern for the animal's pain, but rather fury at the disruption to her plans. As veterinarians were summoned and delivered their diagnosis, a severe tendon injury that would require months of rehabilitation with no guarantee of a full recovery, her expression hardened into something beyond mere disappointment. "What are the chances he'll compete again?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere of the clinic where they had transported Midnight Frost. The veterinarian, Dr. Sarah Chen, met her gaze steadily, years of experience having taught her to deliver difficult news to demanding owners. "Ms. Wellington, with proper care and rehabilitation, Midnight Frost could recover enough for a comfortable life, but returning to competition at his previous level would be highly unlikely. The damage to his tendon is extensive, and pushing him too hard too soon could cause permanent disability." Catherine's response was immediate and chilling. "Then he's of no use to me." Her words fell like icicles in the quiet clinic. What's the point of keeping a show horse that can't show? The cost of rehabilitation alone would be throwing good money after bad. Dr. Chen attempted to argue for the horse's welfare, explaining the rehabilitation process and the possibility of giving him a different purpose, perhaps as a therapy horse or a breeding stallion. But Catherine Wellington hadn't built her empire by being sentimental about her investments. That night, as a fresh snowstorm began to blanket the countryside, Catherine made a decision that would set in motion events beyond her imagination. She summoned Marcus to her office, the warm glow of her desk lamp doing nothing to soften her harsh features. "Take him away," she ordered, her voice devoid of emotion. "I don't care where. Just get him off my property. I won't waste resources on a lame horse." When Marcus began to protest, she cut him off sharply. "Either you do it, or I'll find someone who will. Your job depends on your discretion in this matter." Marcus, a man who had dedicated his life to horses, felt his world crumbling around him. The choice before him seemed impossible. Either participate in this cruel abandonment or lose his position and the ability to care for all the other horses at the academy. With a heavy heart, he nodded, knowing he would never forgive himself for what he was about to do. Under the cover of darkness, as the snowstorm intensified, Marcus and another stable hand loaded Midnight Frost into a trailer. The horse's dark eyes, usually so proud and fierce, now held a look of confusion and pain that would haunt Marcus's dreams. They drove for hours through the winding back roads of Vermont, moving further and further from civilization. Finally, they stopped near an old logging trail, miles from the nearest town. The snow was falling heavily now, reducing visibility to mere feet. With trembling hands, Marcus led Midnight Frost from the trailer, his heart breaking at each painful step the horse took. He had secretly packed a few blankets, laying them over the horse's back in a futile attempt to provide some protection against the elements. "I'm so sorry," he whispered, his words lost in the howling wind. "I'm so sorry, boy." He stood there for a moment longer, watching as Midnight Frost tried to follow him back to the trailer, the horse's instinct for survival warring with his injury. But Marcus forced himself to turn away, climbing back into the truck with tears freezing on his cheeks. As they drove away, Marcus caught one last glimpse of midnight frost in the rearview mirror, a dark shape against the swirling snow, growing smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely into the white void. The image would stay with him forever, a testament to humanity's capacity for both cruelty and cowardice. Midnight Frost, once the pride of Wellington Equestrian Academy, now stood alone in the wilderness, his injury making each step a struggle for survival. The snow continued to fall, covering his dark coat in a layer of white. As the temperature dropped further, the horse's instincts, honed through generations of breeding, told him to seek shelter, but in this unfamiliar territory, with pain shooting through his leg, every movement was a battle against the elements. As the night wore on, the storm showed no signs of relenting. Midnight Frost's strength, already compromised by his injury, began to fade. The cold seeped through the blankets, and exhaustion took its toll. Eventually, the proud stallion could no longer stand. He collapsed in a small clearing, his dark form a stark contrast against the endless white of the snow-covered ground. The world around him grew quieter, the howling wind becoming a distant whisper as hypothermia began to set in. The horse that had once commanded admiration in prestigious arenas now lay helpless, his fate seemingly sealed by human callousness and nature's indifference. But destiny, it seemed, had other plans. Plans that would begin to unfold with the arrival of an unlikely savior, someone who would prove that sometimes the most extraordinary acts of kindness come from the most unexpected sources. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As the first light of dawn began to paint the snow-laden clouds in shades of grey, no one could have predicted how this abandoned horse's story would become a testament to the power of compassion, healing, and the unbreakable spirit of both humans and animals when faced with seemingly insurmountable odds. In the remote outskirts of Vermont's snow-covered wilderness, where the morning light struggled to pierce through heavy clouds, lived Sarah Mitchell. At 32, she had deliberately chosen a life of solitude, operating a small wildlife rehabilitation center from her modest cabin. Her past as a former military veterinarian in Afghanistan had left her with both physical and emotional scars, leading her to seek peace in helping injured animals far from the chaos of the world. The morning that would change everything began like any other. Sarah woke before dawn, her old leg injury aching more than usual, a reminder of the IED that had ended her military career. She pulled on her thick winter gear, preparing for her daily routine of checking the wildlife cameras she had stationed throughout the surrounding forest. These cameras helped her monitor injured animals and track their recovery before release. "What do you think, Shadow?" she asked her Belgian Malinois, a retired military dog who had served alongside her. The dog's ears perked up at her voice, his dark eyes alert despite his graying muzzle. Like Sarah, Shadow carried his own battle scars, but together they had found purpose in their new life. The storm from the previous night had left nearly 2 feet of fresh snow, making their usual patrol route more challenging. Sarah grabbed her emergency medical kit, a habit from her military days that had saved countless lives, both human and animal. The weight of the backpack against her shoulder blades was comforting, familiar. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Shadow's behavior suddenly changed. His posture stiffened, nose working overtime as he caught a scent that made him whine. With urgency, Sarah had learned to trust his instincts implicitly. They had saved her life more than once in the field. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, watching as Shadow began moving purposefully through the deep snow. They deviated from their usual path, pushing through snow-laden branches until they reached a small clearing. What Sarah saw there made her heart stop. A massive black horse lay collapsed in the snow, its dark coat dusted with white crystals. From a distance, it could have been mistaken for a fallen tree, but Sarah's trained eye immediately recognized the subtle rise and fall of labored breathing. Without hesitation, she broke into action, her military training kicking in automatically. "Easy there, beautiful," she murmured, approaching carefully while assessing the situation. The horse's condition was critical. Hypothermia had clearly set in, and there was obvious trauma to one of its legs. But it was the look in the animal's eyes that struck Sarah deepest, a mixture of fear, pain, and something she recognized all too well: the will to survive against all odds. Shadow positioned himself naturally on the horse's other side, his training allowing him to sense exactly what Sarah needed. The horse's head lifted slightly at their approach, nostrils flaring, as it caught their scent, but it made no attempt to rise. Sarah could see the exhaustion in every line of its powerful body. Working quickly, she pulled emergency thermal blankets from her pack, thanking her habit of over-preparing. The horse's coat was ice-cold to the touch, and its pulse was weak, but steady. Years of treating injured animals in combat zones had taught her to work efficiently, even in the most challenging conditions. "You're not dying on my watch," Sarah declared firmly, her voice carrying the same determination that had helped her save countless animals in war-torn areas. She began working methodically, her movements precise, despite the cold that numbed her fingers. The horse's leg injury was severe, but not immediately life-threatening. The cold was the more pressing concern. Sarah knew she couldn't treat the horse here. It needed immediate shelter and warmth, but moving an injured horse this size through deep snow would be nearly impossible alone. For a moment, she felt the weight of impossibility pressing down on her, but then she remembered something her commanding officer had once told her. Impossible just means you haven't figured out the solution yet. She pulled out her satellite phone, another military habit she'd maintained, and dialed the one person she knew might be able to help. Luke Henderson, a local logger who lived a few miles away, had helped her transport injured moose and bears before. He answered on the second ring. "Luke, I need your help and your equipment. I've got an injured horse out here, and it's critical." She quickly gave him their coordinates, thanking whatever deity might be listening that she had maintained her military precision in noting locations. While waiting for Luke, Sarah continued working to stabilize the horse. She covered it with thermal blankets, cleared snow from around its body, and began massaging its muscles to promote blood flow. Shadow remained vigilant, his body providing additional warmth where he pressed against the horse's side. "You're quite the specimen, aren't you?" Sarah murmured, noting the horse's refined features and powerful build despite its current state. "Someone invested a lot in you. The question is, how did you end up out here?" Her trained eye had already spotted signs that this was no ordinary wild horse. This was a highly trained, valuable animal. Luke arrived within 30 minutes, his logging skidder pushing through the snow with determination. His eyes widened at the sight of the horse, but he asked no questions, immediately understanding the urgency of the situation. Together, they rigged a makeshift sled using equipment from his truck and Sarah's supplies. Moving the horse was a delicate operation that took over 2 hours. Sarah monitored its vital signs constantly, refusing to let the cold or her own exhaustion affect her focus. Shadow helped maintain order, his presence somehow keeping the horse calmer during the difficult transport. Finally, they reached Sarah's property, where she had converted an old barn into a rehabilitation center for larger animals. The space was basic, but well-equipped, with heating and medical supplies she'd accumulated over years of treating wildlife. Luke helped her settle the horse into the barn's largest stall, which was fitted with thick rubber mats and fresh bedding. "What's your plan?" Luke asked as they finally got the horse situated. He knew Sarah well enough to recognize the look of determination in her eyes. "First, we get his core temperature up," she replied, already moving to set up heating lamps, "and prepare warm fluids. Then we assess that leg injury properly. After that—" She paused, meeting Luke's concerned gaze. "After that, we figure out where he came from, and why someone would abandon a horse of this quality in a snowstorm." Luke nodded, understanding. The implications. In their small community, news of abandoned animals usually meant someone was trying to hide something. "You know this could get complicated, Sarah. Horses like this one usually belong to people with money and influence." Sarah's jaw set in a familiar way, the same expression she'd worn in Afghanistan when facing impossible odds. "I didn't survive 2 tours treating animals in a war zone to back down from complications, Luke. Someone left this horse to die, and that makes him my responsibility now." After Luke left, Sarah began the painstaking process of treating the horse's injuries. The leg required careful cleaning and examination, revealing what she suspected was a severe tendon injury. The horse's temperature slowly normalized, and Sarah noticed it beginning to show more awareness of its surroundings. "You're safe now," she assured the animal, gently stroking its neck. Shadow lay nearby, maintaining his protective watch. The horse's eyes, though still pained, seemed to hold a glimmer of trust that hadn't been there before. As night fell, Sarah prepared for a long vigil. She'd seen enough cases of hypothermia to know the next 24 hours would be critical. Setting up a cot in the barn, she settled in for the night, her mind already working through the rehabilitation plan she'd need to implement. Shadow curled up beside her cot, but his ears remained alert, monitoring their new charge. Sarah pulled out her medical journal, another military habit, and began documenting the case. As she wrote, she couldn't shake the feeling that this horse's arrival would mark the beginning of something significant. "Well, boy," she whispered to Shadow, "looks like we've got ourselves a new mission." The dog's tail thumped once against the floor in agreement, and in the stall the horse nickered softly, as if acknowledging its new guardians. Outside, the wind continued to howl through the Vermont forests, but inside the barn, a small miracle of survival was unfolding. One that would soon challenge not just Sarah's skills as a healer, but her ability to stand up against powerful forces that would rather see this horse's story buried in the snow. Dawn broke over Sarah's rehabilitation center with a pale golden light that reflected off the fresh snow. She had spent the night monitoring the rescued horse's vital signs, catching only brief moments of rest between checkups. Her military training had taught her that the first 24 hours after rescue were crucial, and she wasn't about to let exhaustion compromise her patient's care. As she changed the horse's bandages in the early morning light, Sarah noticed something she had missed in the urgency of the rescue. A small, partially healed scar near his right ear that looked intentionally made. Her years of treating military service animals had taught her to recognize identification marks, and this one sparked her professional curiosity. "You've got quite a story to tell, don't you?" she murmured, carefully documenting the mark in her medical journal. The horse's dark eyes watched her movements with growing awareness. His condition notably improved from the previous day. The heating lamps and warm fluids had done their work, bringing his core temperature back to normal. Sarah's satellite phone buzzed, Luke's number flashing on the screen. "Sarah, you need to see this." His voice was urgent. "There's a notice in the Regional Equestrian Bulletin about a missing show horse from Wellington Academy. The description matches your rescue." She felt her stomach tighten. Wellington Academy was notorious in Vermont's equestrian circles, not just for their champions, but for their ruthless pursuit of perfection. "Send me the details," she replied, her mind already racing through the implications. Within minutes, she was staring at a photograph of her rescued horse in his prime, Midnight Frost, champion stallion of Wellington Academy. The article mentioned a tragic accident and claimed the horse had escaped during transport to a rehabilitation facility. Sarah's jaw clenched at the obvious lie. "No escort vehicle tracks in the snow where we found you," she said to the horse, who was now nibbling at some hay. "No signs of panic or running. You were deliberately left there." Shadow, sensing her tension, moved closer to her side. Sarah's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Through the barn's window, she spotted 3 expensive SUVs pulling up her driveway. Shadow's posture stiffened, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Easy, boy," she soothed, though her own military instincts were on high alert. "Let's go meet our visitors." Catherine Wellington stepped out of the lead vehicle, her perfectly tailored winter coat and severe expression marking her as someone used to getting her way. She was flanked by 2 men in suits and Marcus, her head trainer, who kept his eyes downcast. "Miss Mitchell." Catherine's voice carried the artificial warmth of someone used to wielding politeness as a weapon. "I understand you found my horse. I'm here to collect him and, of course, compensate you for your trouble." Sarah stood her ground, Shadow a steady presence beside her. Her years in combat zones had taught her to read people, and everything about this situation set off warning bells. "Your horse was found abandoned in a snowstorm with a severe injury. As a licensed veterinarian and wildlife rehabilitator, I'm obligated to report suspected animal abuse." Catherine's smile tightened. "I assure you there's been a misunderstanding. Midnight Frost escaped during transport. We've been searching frantically in the opposite direction of where he was found," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying the steel of command she'd developed in the military. "With no search parties in the area where my cameras picked up. Your vehicle's dropping him off?" Marcus flinched visibly, and Catherine's expression darkened. "Miss Mitchell, I don't think you understand who you're dealing with. Wellington Academy has significant influence in this state. One call from me could shut down your little operation here." Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same clarity she'd experienced in combat situations. "And one call. From me to the State Veterinary Board, with evidence from my wildlife cameras and medical documentation of intentional abandonment, could shut down your academy. Would you like to compare consequences, Ms. Wellington?" The tension in the air was palpable. Catherine's facade cracked slightly, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Name your price," she said flatly, Everyone has one. Sarah's laugh was without humor. You're right, I do have a price. She stepped closer to Catherine, her voice low and intense. My price is knowing that every animal under my care is safe from people who see them as disposable investments. Midnight Frost stays here. This isn't over, Catherine snapped, turning sharply on her heel. You'll regret this decision. As the SUVs pulled away, Luke's truck came bouncing up the driveway. He jumped out, looking worried. I got here as fast as I could. Are you okay? Sarah nodded, her mind already working through contingency plans. We need to document everything, Luke. Every piece of evidence, every medical record. Catherine Wellington isn't used to being denied, and she's going to retaliate. Inside the barn, they found Midnight Frost standing alertly in his stall, as if he had sensed the confrontation outside. Sarah approached him slowly, noting how he leaned into her touch despite his injuries. You're staying right here, boy, she assured him. We've got your back. Over the next few days, Sarah threw herself into Midnight Frost's rehabilitation. With the same intensity she'd brought to treating wounded animals in combat zones, she developed a comprehensive recovery plan, combining traditional veterinary medicine with techniques she'd learned treating military service animals. The horse's leg injury, while serious, showed promising signs of healing under her care. Sarah introduced gentle physical therapy exercises, using her experience with injured military horses to gauge his progress. What surprised her most was his willingness to trust her, despite his obvious previous trauma. You know who's really trying to help you, don't you? She said one evening, as she applied a healing poultice to his leg. Shadow lay nearby, having appointed himself Midnight, Frost's personal guardian. Luke visited regularly, helping with the more demanding physical tasks and bringing news from town. Catherine Wellington had indeed begun making moves against Sarah's rehabilitation center, filing complaints with local authorities and spreading rumors about her competence. She's trying to get your wildlife rehabilitation license revoked, Luke reported grimly. Claims you're not qualified to care for domestic animals. Sarah smiled grimly. She doesn't know about my military service record or my specialized training in equine rehabilitation. I've treated horses in active war zones. I think I can handle a show stallion with a tendon injury. But Catherine's influence ran deep, and soon Sarah found herself fighting battles on multiple fronts. Feed suppliers mysteriously cancelled their deliveries. Local veterinary supply companies claimed they were out of stock of items she regularly ordered. Anonymous complaints about her facility began appearing on social media. Yet for every obstacle Catherine created, Sarah found unexpected allies. Local farmers began delivering hay and feed, refusing payment. A retired veterinarian from 2 counties overoffered to share his supply contacts. Luke's logging clients, many of whom were wealthy horse owners themselves, began speaking out in support of Sarah's work. Most surprisingly, Marcus, Wellington Academy's head trainer, reached out secretly through Luke. I can't be seen helping you, he said over the phone, but I have documentation, records of other horses Catherine has discarded when they no longer served her purposes. Would that help? Sarah's military training had taught her the value of strong intelligence. That could make all the difference, she replied, carefully recording the conversation in her journal. As winter deepened, Midnight Frost's recovery progressed steadily. Sarah documented every step meticulously, building a case that would prove her rehabilitation methods were working. The horse's personality began to emerge, intelligent, gentle, and surprisingly resilient. One morning, as Sarah led him through his therapy exercises in the snow, she noticed something remarkable. Despite his injury, Midnight Frost moved with a natural grace that spoke of his championship breeding. But more than that, he showed an eagerness to work, to improve, to overcome his limitations. "You never lost your spirit, did you?" she mused, watching him navigate the special obstacle course she'd designed for his rehabilitation. They couldn't break that, no matter how hard they tried. Shadow barked in agreement, trotting alongside the horse as he completed his exercises. The unlikely trio, an injured war veteran, a retired military dog, and a discarded show horse, had formed a bond that went beyond mere rehabilitation. As Sarah reviewed her progress notes that evening, she realized something profound. This wasn't just about saving one horse anymore. It had become about standing up against a system that valued profit over compassion, about proving that every life deserved a chance at recovery and renewal. "We're going to change things," she promised Midnight Frost as she completed his evening. "Treatment, not just for you, but for all the others like you. Sometimes the greatest victories come from the battles we're told we can't win." In her time treating animals in combat zones, Sarah had learned that healing was about more than just physical recovery. It was about restoring trust, rebuilding confidence, and rekindling the will to thrive. As she watched Midnight Frost's steady progress, she knew they were accomplishing all three. The confrontation with Catherine Wellington had only been the beginning. The real battle, the fight to transform how society treated animals it deemed no longer useful, was just getting started. But as Sarah Mitchell stood in her barn that evening, watching Shadow guard his equine friend with fierce loyalty, she knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The winter sun cast long shadows across Sarah's rehabilitation center. As she reviewed the latest round of evidence Marcus had provided, the documents revealed a disturbing pattern at Wellington Academy. Midnight Frost wasn't the first champion horse to mysteriously disappear after an injury. Catherine's history of discarding animals stretched back years, carefully hidden behind legal settlements and non-disclosure agreements. "Look at this, Shadow," Sarah murmured, spreading the papers across her desk. The dog lifted his head from his spot near the fireplace, ears perking up at her voice. 5 cases in the last 3 years alone. All champions, all retired after injuries that could have been rehabilitated. Her satellite phone buzzed. A text from Luke. "Emergency meeting at my place tonight. Bring your documentation." Sarah's military instincts tingled. Luke never called emergency meetings without good reason. After ensuring Midnight Frost was comfortable for the evening, Sarah gathered her evidence files and headed to Luke's cabin. The familiar drive through snow-covered roads gave her time to think, to strategize. Her years in combat had taught her that information was often the most powerful weapon in any battle. Luke's cabin was already crowded when she arrived. To her surprise, she recognized several faces from the local equestrian community, owners, trainers, and even a state veterinary board member. Marcus sat nervously in a corner, his presence both unexpected and telling. "Sarah," Luke began once everyone had settled, "Catherine Wellington filed formal charges against your rehabilitation center this morning. She's claiming unsafe conditions and unauthorized treatment of domestic animals. But that's not the worst part. Rebecca Chen, the state veterinary board member, stepped forward. She's pushing for emergency legislation that would require all wildlife rehabilitation centers to be affiliated with major veterinary hospitals or academic institutions. It's a direct attempt to shut down independent operators like you. Sarah absorbed the news with the calm focus she'd developed in combat situations. She's not just trying to get Midnight Frost back, she's trying to change the system to prevent anyone from challenging her methods. Exactly, Marcus spoke up, his voice shaking slightly. She wants to ensure no one can interfere with how she handles her investments again. But I have something that might help. He pulled out a USB drive. Security footage from the night Midnight Frost was abandoned. I've been saving it, waiting for the right moment. Sarah connected the drive to Luke's laptop, and the group watched in silence as the footage showed Catherine Wellington clearly ordering Midnight Frost's abandonment. The timestamp and GPS coordinates were clearly visible, damning evidence that contradicted every statement she'd made about the horse's disappearance. This changes everything, Rebecca said quietly. But Catherine has powerful friends in the state legislature. Evidence alone won't be enough. We need public support. Sarah's military training kicked in. Every mission needed a strategic plan. Then we give them a story they can't ignore. Not just about Midnight Frost, but about every animal Catherine has discarded. We show them what real rehabilitation looks like. The group spent hours developing their strategy. Rebecca would delay the proposed legislation through procedural means. Local equestrian owners would speak out about Catherine's practices. Marcus would provide testimony about other cases. But the centerpiece would be Midnight Frost's recovery, proof that worthless horses could thrive with proper care. As the meeting dispersed, Luke pulled Sarah aside. Catherine's going to fight back hard when this goes public. Are you ready for that? Sarah's smile was grim but determined. In Afghanistan, I treated injured horses while under enemy fire. Catherine Wellington doesn't scare me. The next few weeks became a carefully orchestrated campaign. Sarah documented every aspect of Midnight Frost's rehabilitation, sharing his progress through social media channels managed by supporters. The horse's natural charisma, combined with his remarkable recovery, began drawing attention. Local children started visiting the rehabilitation center, learning about animal care and compassion. Sarah began offering educational programs, teaching young riders about proper horse rehabilitation and the importance of treating animals with respect. Each visit helped build a community of supporters invested in Midnight Frost's story. One morning, as Sarah led Midnight Frost through his exercises, she noticed something remarkable. The horse, once broken in spirit and body, moved with renewed confidence. His injury, while still healing, no longer defined him. In his eyes, she saw the same resilience she'd recognized in wounded military animals, the determination to overcome, to adapt, to thrive. "You're not just healing," she told him, stroking his gleaming coat. "You're becoming a symbol of everything they said was impossible." The security cameras caught Catherine Wellington's next move before she could execute. Late one night, her men attempted to break into the rehabilitation center, likely planning to take Midnight Frost by force. They hadn't counted on Shadow's military training or Sarah's security systems. The attempted theft made headlines, bringing unwanted attention to Wellington Academy's practices. Other former employees began coming forward, sharing stories of discarded champions and cruel training methods. Catherine's carefully constructed image began to crumble. But Sarah knew the real victory wasn't in exposing Catherine's crimes. It was in showing there was a better way. She organized an open house at the rehabilitation center, inviting the public to see how injured animals could recover with proper care and compassion. The event drew hundreds of visitors, including several prominent state legislators. They watched in amazement as Midnight Frost, the horse Catherine had deemed worthless, demonstrated his progress through a series of gentle exercises. Children gathered around him, learning about rehabilitation techniques and the importance of never giving up on an injured animal. "This isn't just about one horse," Sarah explained to the gathered crowd. "It's about changing how we view animals who need our help. Every life has value. Every creature deserves a chance to heal." The legislation Catherine had proposed was quietly withdrawn. The State Veterinary Board, influenced by the public support for Sarah's work, instead began developing new guidelines for animal rehabilitation based on her methods. What had started as one woman's fight to save a single horse was transforming into a movement. Rebecca visited the center one afternoon, watching as Sarah worked with Midnight Frost. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "when I first heard about this case, I thought it was just another dispute between an owner and a rescuer. But you've turned it into something much more." Sarah nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "In the military, I learned that the greatest victories often come from refusing to accept defeat. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say this isn't right, to change an entire system." As winter began to fade into spring, Midnight Frost's recovery continued to exceed all expectations. While he would never return to high-level competition, he had found a new purpose as a therapy horse, helping children with disabilities and veterans with PTSD. His gentle nature and resilient spirit made him perfect for the role. Catherine Wellington's influence in the equestrian world diminished as more stories of her practices came to light. Wellington Academy underwent a complete restructuring, with new policies prioritizing animal welfare over competition results. Marcus, freed from his former employer's influence, began working with Sarah to develop better rehabilitation protocols for injured show horses. The rehabilitation center expanded, adding new facilities specifically designed for equine therapy and recovery. Sarah's military experience proved invaluable in treating not just injured animals, but also in helping veterans find healing through working with them. The center became a model for others across the country, proving that compassion and excellence could coexist. One evening, as Sarah completed her final rounds, she found Midnight Frost standing at his stall door, watching her with those intelligent eyes that had first captured her heart in the snow. Shadow lay nearby, as always, the unlikely guardian of their shared mission. "We did it, boy," she said softly, running her hand along his neck. "We showed them that every life deserves a second chance, that healing is possible if someone just believes enough to try." The horse nickered softly in response, pressing his head against her shoulder in a gesture of trust and affection. In that moment, Sarah realized that their story had become something larger than herself, larger than Midnight Frost, larger even than their battle with Catherine Wellington. It had become a testament to the power of compassion, resilience, and the unwavering belief that doing what's right was always worth the fight. With spring arriving in Vermont, Sarah's rehabilitation center had transformed into a beacon of hope for both animals and humans. The success of Midnight Frost's recovery had attracted attention from unexpected quarters, including Dr. James Harrison, a leading researcher in equine rehabilitation from the University of Colorado, who arrived one morning unannounced. "Ms. Mitchell," he called out as he stepped from his rental car, "your methods with Midnight Frost have challenged everything we thought we knew about severe tendon recovery in performance horses. I had to see this for myself." Sarah, who was working with a group of veterans in the therapy paddock, watched as Midnight Frost demonstrated his gentle nature with a former Marine struggling with PTSD. The horse's intuitive understanding of human emotion had become one of his most remarkable qualities. "What you're seeing, Dr. Harrison," Sarah explained, "isn't just physical rehabilitation. It's about healing the whole being, body, mind, and spirit, something I learned treating animals in combat zones." Dr. Harrison observed the session with growing amazement. The former Marine, who had barely spoken during his first visits, was now quietly talking to Midnight Frost, sharing memories of his service that he'd never told his therapist. The horse stood perfectly still, head lowered attentively, as if understanding the weight of each word. "This goes beyond traditional therapy," Dr. Harrison noted, scribbling in his notebook. "You're pioneering something entirely new here." But Sarah's success had drawn more than just academic attention. Catherine Wellington, though publicly discredited, had not given up her fight. She had hired private investigators to dig into Sarah's military past, hoping to find something, anything, to discredit her work. What they found instead only added to Sarah's credibility. Records of her service showed numerous commendations for innovative animal care under extreme conditions. Photos emerged of her treating horses in active war zones, saving both military and civilian animals others had deemed beyond help. One morning, Luke arrived with news that would change everything again. The state legislature is considering a bill to establish standards for equine rehabilitation centers, he announced. They want you to testify about your methods. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was an opportunity to ensure that what happened to Midnight Frost would never happen to another horse. But it also meant leaving her comfort zone, stepping into the political arena she'd always avoided. "You know what this means," Luke continued. "You'll have to face Catherine Wellington again. She's hired lobbyists to fight against the regulations." Sarah watched as Midnight Frost led a therapy session with a group of children with autism, his movements gentle and precise, his patience endless. Then it's time to show them what real healing looks like. The preparation for her testimony became a community effort. Veterans who had found healing at her center volunteered to speak. Parents of children in the therapy program offered their stories. Even Marcus, still dealing with guilt over his role in Midnight Frost's abandonment, agreed to testify about the need for change. Dr. Harrison offered to present his research, showing how Sarah's methods had revolutionized equine rehabilitation. "What you've developed here," he told her, "could change how we treat injured horses worldwide." The day of the hearing arrived with the fresh promise of spring. The legislative chamber was packed with supporters and opponents alike. Catherine Wellington sat in the front row, her expression cold and calculating as Sarah took the stand. But Sarah wasn't alone. Through the chamber windows, she could see Midnight Frost in the courtyard, surrounded by veterans and children from her therapy programs. Shadow sat alertly by her feet, a steady reminder of all they had overcome. Distinguished members of the legislature, Sarah began, her voice clear and strong. I'm not here just to talk about horse rehabilitation. I'm here to talk about responsibility, about the sacred trust between humans and animals, and about the extraordinary healing that happens when we refuse to give up on those others have deemed worthless. She shared Midnight Frost's story, but also the stories of countless other animals and humans who had found healing together at her center. She explained how her military experience had taught her that recovery was possible even in the most challenging circumstances. In war zones, I learned that healing isn't just about treating injuries. It's about restoring hope, she continued. Every animal at our center teaches us something about resilience, about the power of second chances, and about the incredible capacity for recovery when given the chance. Dr. Harrison presented his research, showing how Sarah's methods had achieved recovery rates that conventional wisdom had deemed impossible. Veterans spoke about finding peace through working with the horses. Parents shared stories of children speaking their first words to Midnight Frost. When Catherine Wellington's lobbyists tried to argue that regulation would hurt the competitive horse industry, Marcus stepped forward. His testimony about the dark practices at Wellington Academy, delivered with quiet dignity, silenced the opposition. The legislature passed the bill unanimously, establishing Mitchell standards for equine rehabilitation centers across the state. But Sarah's influence didn't stop there. Other states began adopting similar regulations, and her center became a training ground for a new generation of veterinarians and therapists. One evening, as the sun set over the Vermont hills, Sarah stood in the therapy paddock watching Midnight Frost work with a young girl who hadn't walked since a car accident. The horse moved with careful precision, supporting the child's weight as she took tentative steps alongside him. "You see that?" she said to Dr. Harrison, who had stayed on as a research partner. "That's what happens when you believe in possibilities instead of limitations." The girl's parents watched through tears as their daughter walked further than she had in months, her trust in Midnight Frost giving her the confidence to push beyond her fears. The horse matched his pace to hers perfectly, his own recovered leg strong enough to support them both. Sarah's rehabilitation center had become more than just a place for healing. It was a living testament to the power of compassion, innovation, and unwavering belief in the potential for recovery. Every success story, whether animal or human, added to a growing body of evidence that challenged traditional limitations. The military precision that had once served Sarah in combat zones now found new purpose in documenting and sharing their methods. She established training programs for other rehabilitation centers, ensuring that their approach to healing could reach far beyond Vermont's borders. Catherine Wellington made one final attempt to discredit Sarah's work, hiring a prominent journalist to investigate her center. But the reporter, moved by what she witnessed, instead wrote a powerful exposé about the transformation of the equestrian industry, contrasting Wellington's profit-driven approach with Sarah's model of compassionate care. As summer approached, Sarah received an unexpected visitor, a young trainer from Wellington Academy, seeking guidance on establishing a rehabilitation program there. The academy, under new management, was working to rebuild its reputation based on ethical treatment and comprehensive care. "I want to learn everything," the trainer said, watching Midnight Frost guide another therapy session. "Not just about physical rehabilitation, but about this whole approach to healing." Sarah smiled, remembering her own journey from combat veterinarian to pioneer in equine therapy. "The first lesson," she said, "is that every life has value, and every injury is an opportunity to prove that healing is possible when we refuse to give up." That evening, as she completed her rounds, Sarah found Midnight Frost standing at his favorite spot in the paddock, gazing out over the valley. Shadow lay nearby, grey now around his muzzle, but still alert and protective. Together, they had created something extraordinary, a place where healing transcended traditional boundaries, where hope flourished, and where second chances were not just given, but celebrated. "We did more than just prove them wrong," she told the horse, stroking his neck. "We showed them a better way forward." Midnight Frost nickered softly in response, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of one who had journeyed from darkness to light, from abandonment to purpose, from broken to healed, and in doing so had helped heal countless others along the way. As summer bloomed in Vermont, Sarah's rehabilitation center faced an unexpected challenge that would test everything they had built. A devastating storm swept through the region, causing widespread damage to farms and stables across the state. The center's resources were stretched thin as desperate owners brought in injured horses, each with their own heart-wrenching story. "We're at capacity, Sarah," Luke warned one morning, surveying the crowded stables. "And there are more coming. The Riverside stables lost their roof. They're evacuating 20 horses." Sarah stood in the therapy paddock, watching Midnight Frost work with a group of injured horses that had arrived the previous night. The former champion had taken on a new role, helping calm, traumatized animals with his steady presence. His own journey from broken to healer seemed to give him a unique ability to connect with other injured horses. "We don't turn away animals." "Indeed," Sarah replied, her military training kicking in as she formulated a plan. "Time to implement emergency protocols." She pulled out her satellite phone and began mobilizing a network of supporters they'd built over the months. Within hours, local farmers arrived with extra supplies and temporary shelters. Veterans from her therapy programs volunteered to help construct additional stables. Dr. Harrison coordinated with veterinary students from nearby universities to provide round-the-clock care. But the true miracle was watching Midnight Frost step into a leadership role. The horse, who had once been deemed worthless, now moved among the injured animals with purpose, his calm demeanor helping to settle nervous newcomers. Shadow worked alongside him, the unlikely pair forming an effective team in managing the crisis. "Look at him," Dr. Harrison marveled, watching Midnight Frost guide a terrified young mare into a temporary shelter. "He's not just recovered. He's become a healer in his own right." The crisis brought unexpected allies. Catherine Wellington's former clients, witnessing the center's dedication during the emergency, began publicly supporting Sarah's methods. Several prominent stable owners who had once dismissed her approach now sent their injured horses to her care. One morning, as Sarah worked tirelessly to treat the influx of injured animals, a sleek black car pulled up to the center. To everyone's surprise, Elizabeth Wellington, Catherine's estranged daughter and accomplished equestrian veterinarian, stepped out. "I've been following your work," Elizabeth said, rolling up her sleeves without preamble. "I want to help, and maybe learn something my mother never understood, that horses are more than just investments." The addition of Elizabeth to their team proved invaluable. Her expertise, combined with Sarah's innovative methods, helped Save horses that traditional veterinary practices might have given up on. More importantly, her presence sent a powerful message about choosing compassion over competition. As the emergency response continued, Sarah noticed something remarkable happening. The center wasn't just healing injured horses, it was healing the rifts in the equestrian community itself. Competitors who had once viewed each other with suspicion now worked side by side, sharing resources and knowledge. Midnight Frost's influence extended beyond the physical healing of other horses. His story inspired a change in how people viewed injured animals. Stable owners who might once have discarded injured horses now sought rehabilitation options, understanding that recovery was possible with proper care and patience. The crisis also brought national attention. News outlets picked up the story of how a former military veterinarian and a discarded champion horse had created a model for emergency animal care. Sarah found herself fielding calls from rehabilitation centers across the country, all eager to learn from their methods. One evening, as the emergency began to stabilize, Sarah found Elizabeth sitting alone in the observation room, watching Midnight Frost through the window. The horse was gentling, showing a newly arrived injured stallion how to navigate the therapy equipment. "I spent years watching my mother destroy horses like him," Elizabeth said quietly. "I always knew it was wrong, but I never had the courage to stand up to her. Watching him now, it's like seeing everything I wished we had done differently." Sarah understood the weight of those words. "It's never too late to choose a different path," she replied. Midnight Frost taught us that. The next few weeks brought new challenges and victories. The center expanded its emergency response protocols, creating a model for other facilities to follow. Sarah and Elizabeth worked together to develop new rehabilitation techniques, combining traditional veterinary medicine with innovative therapy approaches. The transformation of the center during the crisis caught the attention of the International Equestrian Federation. They sent representatives to study how a small rehabilitation center in Vermont had managed to handle such a large-scale emergency while maintaining high standards of care. "Your approach challenges conventional wisdom," one representative noted, watching Midnight Frost lead a therapy session, "but the results speak for themselves." Sarah knew the results went beyond physical recovery statistics. She saw it in the way competing stables now collaborated instead of conflicted. She saw it in the growing number of veterinarians adopting their methods. Most importantly, she saw it in the eyes of every animal that found healing at their center. One afternoon, as the last of the emergency cases were being discharged, Sarah received an unexpected letter. It was from Catherine Wellington, announcing her retirement from the equestrian world. The letter contained no apology, but its final line spoke volumes. Perhaps there are other ways to measure success than just winning. The crisis had transformed their small center into something larger, a model for how compassion could triumph over competition, how healing could extend beyond physical recovery, and how one horse's journey from abandon to healer could inspire an entire community to change. As summer turned to fall, Sarah stood in the therapy paddock with Shadow at her feet, watching Midnight Frost work with a group of recovering horses. The former champion moved with grace and purpose, his own healed injury a testament to the power of second chances. "You know what the greatest victory is?" she asked Elizabeth, who had become an integral part of their team. "It's not just in healing these horses, It's in showing the world that every life has value, that every setback can become a comeback, and that true strength lies in helping others heal. Elizabeth nodded, understanding deeply. My mother spent years chasing victories in competition rings. But this, what happens here every day, these are the real victories. The rehabilitation center had become more than just a place for physical recovery. It was a living example of how crisis could lead to transformation, how adversity could spark innovation, and how one act of compassion could ripple out to change countless lives. As the sun set over the Vermont hills, Sarah watched Midnight Frost lead his group of recovering horses back to the stables. Shadow trotted alongside, them still the faithful guardian. The sight reminded her of something she'd learned in combat, that the greatest heroes aren't always those who win battles, but those who show others how to heal from them. Every day you prove them wrong, she told Midnight Frost as he passed, reaching out to touch his strong neck. Every life you help heal is another victory over those who said you were worthless. The horse paused, pressing his head against her shoulder in a gesture that had become familiar. In his eyes, Sarah saw the same spirit that had survived abandonment in the snow, the same strength that had defied those who had discarded him, and the same compassion that now helped others find their way back to health. The crisis had tested their resources, their methods, and their resolve. But in doing so, it had proven something profound, that the capacity for healing, both giving and receiving it, knew no bounds when fueled by compassion and unwavering belief in the possibility of recovery. As autumn painted Vermont's landscapes in brilliant colors, Sarah's Rehabilitation Center received an invitation that would take their mission to an international stage. The World Equestrian Rehabilitation Conference in Switzerland had selected her and Midnight Frost to deliver the keynote presentation on innovative healing methods. They want us to demonstrate our therapy techniques live, Sarah explained to her team, gathered in the center's main office. It's an opportunity to show the global equestrian community that there's a better way. Elizabeth Wellington, who had become the center's chief veterinary officer, immediately saw the significance. This could change how rehabilitation is approached worldwide, but Sarah taking Midnight Frost overseas, there are risks. Sarah understood the concerns. International travel would be stressful for any horse, let alone one with a history of injury. But Midnight Frost had proven time and again that he was more than just a success story. He was a pioneer in his own right. We've received requests from rehabilitation centers across Europe, Dr. Harrison added, reviewing the conference materials. They want to implement our methods, but seeing is believing. Midnight Frost's presence would make our case undeniable. The preparation for the international journey became a community effort. Local trainers helped condition Midnight Frost for the long flight. Veterans from the therapy program worked with him in various environments to prepare him for new surroundings. Shadow, though unable to make the journey, seemed to understand the importance of their mission. As word spread about their upcoming presentation, something unexpected happened. Former clients of Wellington Academy began sending letters and videos, documenting their own experiences with discarded horses. Their stories painted a picture of an industry in desperate need of reform. One morning, while supervising Midnight Frost's preparation exercises, Sarah received a call that left her speechless. The International Olympic Committee's equestrian, Division wanted to use their rehabilitation model as a standard for handling injured competition horses. They're proposing mandatory rehabilitation attempts before any competition horse can be retired, Luke explained, his voice excited. Your methods could become the global standard. The significance wasn't lost on Sarah. What had started as one woman's fight to save a single horse in a snowstorm was now poised to transform how the world treated injured animals. The journey to Switzerland marked Midnight Frost's first flight since his competition days. Sarah stayed with him throughout, monitoring his comfort and stress levels. The horse's calm demeanor during the flight impressed even the experienced transport team. "He's not the same animal that used to fly to competitions," one handler remarked. "There's a wisdom in him now, a steadiness that comes from healing others." The World Equestrian Rehabilitation Conference was held in a state-of-the-art facility overlooking Lake Geneva. Representatives from over 50 countries filled the auditorium as Sarah and Midnight Frost took the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, standing beside her equine partner, "what you're about to see isn't just a presentation about rehabilitation techniques. It's a testament to the power of believing in second chances." Over the next hour, they demonstrated their innovative methods. Midnight Frost worked with several local horses, showing how his own experience as a patient had evolved into an ability to guide others through their healing journey. The audience watched in amazement as he helped a nervous, injured mare navigate the therapy equipment. His gentle encouragement and patient demeanor spoke louder than any technical explanation could. "This is beyond physical rehabilitation," Sarah explained to the captivated audience. "It's about restoring trust, rebuilding confidence, and recognizing that every animal has an innate capacity for healing if we're willing to give them the chance." During the conference, rehabilitation centers from around the world approached them with partnership proposals, but it was a conversation with a young girl in a wheelchair that truly highlighted their impact. "Your horse," she said, watching Midnight Frost demonstrate a therapy technique. "He shows us that being broken doesn't mean being finished. Sometimes it's just the beginning of a different kind of strength." The conference culminated in the announcement of a global initiative, the Midnight Frost Protocol, establishing new standards for equine rehabilitation. Centers worldwide would be trained in their methods, ensuring that no injured horse would be discarded without a chance at recovery. Back in Vermont, the rehabilitation center continued to evolve. They established a training program for international veterinarians and therapists, sharing their knowledge while constantly innovating new techniques. Elizabeth took charge of expanding their research department, collaborating with universities worldwide to document and improve their methods. "We're not just changing how we treat injured horses," she observed. "We're changing how we value life itself." One crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves drifted down around the therapy paddock, Sarah watched Midnight Frost work with a group of students from a European veterinary school. The horse moved with the confidence of a teacher, his own healed, injury a living lesson in the possibilities of recovery. "You know what amazes me most," Dr. Harrison said, joining her at the fence. "It's not just the physical rehabilitation, it's how he teaches resilience. Every animal that works with him seems to understand that their injury is not their destiny." The impact of their work continued to ripple outward. Competitive stables that had once viewed injured horses as lost causes now saw them as candidates for transformation. The notion that value was measured solely by performance was being replaced by a deeper understanding of worth. Shadow, though showing his age, remained a constant presence at the center. The bond between the military dog and the rescued horse had become legendary, a symbol of how unexpected partnerships could create extraordinary healing. As winter approached again, Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. The night she'd found midnight frost in the snow seemed both yesterday and a lifetime ago. "We've come full circle," she told him one evening, as they stood in the exact spot where she'd first discovered him. "But this time, we're not just survivors. We're guides for others finding their way back from the dark." The horse pressed his head against her shoulder, a gesture that had become their shared language of understanding. In his eyes, Sarah saw not just the reflection of their past struggles, but the promise of future transformations. Their story had become more than a tale of rescue and rehabilitation. It was a blueprint for change, a testament to the power of compassion, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest healing comes from helping others heal. The Vermont hills, now preparing for another winter, had witnessed their journey from crisis to triumph. But unlike that desperate night in the snow, they now faced the coming season not with fear, but with the confidence of those who had discovered that every ending could become a new beginning. As darkness fell, Sarah watched midnight frost lead. The day's last therapy session, the sight of him strong and purposeful, guiding another injured horse toward recovery, was a living embodiment of their mission, proving that with enough love, patience and belief, any broken spirit could not only heal but become a healer. The international recognition had validated their methods, but the real victory was in the daily miracles that happened in their therapy paddock. Each small step forward, each moment of breakthrough, each life transformed by the power of unwavering faith in the possibility of recovery. Winter descended on Vermont once again, but this year brought a different kind of challenge to Sarah's rehabilitation center. A prestigious film production company had arrived to document their groundbreaking work, hoping to share their story with the world through a feature-length documentary. "Your methods aren't just changing equine rehabilitation," the director explained, setting up cameras in the therapy paddock. "They're challenging how society views healing itself. We want to capture that transformation." Sarah initially hesitated about the attention, her military background making her wary of the spotlight, but she recognized the opportunity to spread their message further. Midnight Frost, however, seemed to understand the importance of their new mission, carrying himself with natural dignity before the cameras. The documentary team captured daily life at the center, from morning rehabilitation sessions to evening therapy groups. They filmed Midnight Frost working with injured horses, showing how his own experience of healing had evolved into an innate ability to guide others through their recovery. During filming, an unexpected visitor arrived, James Cooper, a renowned Olympic equestrian trainer whose methods had once rivaled Catherine Wellington's in their ruthlessness. His presence caused immediate tension among the staff, but his purpose surprised everyone. "I've been watching your work," he admitted to Sarah, "watching Midnight Frost lead a therapy session. Everything I thought I knew about training and healing, I'm starting to question it all." Cooper's visit coincided with the arrival of his own champion horse, Silversmith, who had suffered a career-ending injury similar to Midnight Frost's. Instead of discarding the horse as he once would have, Cooper had come seeking help. "I can't do it anymore," he confessed, his voice breaking. "I can't just throw them away when they're hurt. There has to be a better way." The documentary cameras captured what happened next, a powerful transformation as Midnight Frost took on perhaps his most challenging case yet. Silversmith, unlike other injured horses, carried the weight of years of intensive training and pressure. His spirit, not just his body, needed healing. Sarah watched in amazement as Midnight Frost approached the nervous stallion. The two horses seemed to recognize something in each other, a shared history of pressure and pain, but also the possibility of renewal. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Harrison observed, filming the interaction for their research. Midnight Frost isn't just demonstrating rehabilitation techniques. He's showing Silversmith a new way to be. Over the next few weeks, the documentary team recorded the painstaking process of rehabilitation. They captured the setbacks and breakthroughs, the moments of frustration and triumph. But most importantly, they captured the gradual transformation of James Cooper himself. "I've won Olympic medals," Cooper reflected during an interview, watching Silversmith make progress. "But I've never seen anything as impressive as what happens here. This isn't just about physical healing. It's about rediscovering the joy of working with horses." The documentary also focused on the center's expanding influence. Veterans from their therapy programs were now training to become rehabilitation specialists themselves. International students arrived to learn their methods, carrying the knowledge back to their own countries. One morning, the cameras captured an extraordinary moment. Silversmith, who had been hesitant to trust anyone, finally allowed Cooper to approach him without fear. The trainer, who had once valued only perfection and victory, broke down in tears. "All these years," he said, touching his horse's neck gently, "I thought I was making them stronger. But real strength, it's what I see here. It's in the healing, in the patience, in the trust." The documentary team was present when the center received news that would cement their legacy. The International Equestrian Federation had voted to implement the Midnight Frost Protocol as a mandatory standard for all member nations. No competition horse could be retired due to injury without first attempting rehabilitation under their guidelines. Sarah found herself reflecting on the journey as she watched the film crew capture Midnight Frost and Silversmith walking together in the snow-covered paddock. The contrast between that desperate night of rescue and the present moment was stark. "You've started a revolution," Elizabeth told her, reviewing the documentary footage. "Not just in how we treat injured horses, but in how we understand healing itself." The film crew's presence brought unexpected benefits. Their coverage attracted attention from medical researchers studying parallel applications for human rehabilitation. The concept of using recovered patients as therapy guides began gaining traction in human medicine. One afternoon, as Sarah worked with a group of new rehabilitation students, she noticed something remarkable. Midnight Frost had developed his own way of selecting which injured horses to work with, somehow knowing which ones needed his guidance most. "He's not just demonstrating techniques," Dr. Harrison observed. "He's teaching empathy. He shows them that their injury doesn't define them." The documentary captured the center's expansion as they broke ground on new facilities. The original barn where Sarah had first treated Midnight Frost would become a museum, preserving the story of how one act of compassion had sparked a global movement. James Cooper, transformed by his experience, announced his retirement from competition training, Instead, he would dedicate his resources to establishing rehabilitation centers based on their model across Europe. Success isn't about winning anymore, he declared during his final interview. It's about helping others find their way back to wholeness. As filming wrapped up, the documentary team had captured something more profound than they'd anticipated. They documented not just a revolutionary approach to rehabilitation, but a fundamental shift in how people viewed the relationship between healing and teaching. Sarah stood in the therapy paddock on the last day of filming, watching midnight. Frost worked with a newly arrived injured horse. Shadow, though moving slower now, still maintained his protective watch. "You know what they're really filming?" she asked Elizabeth, who had become more than just a colleague. She was now a partner in their mission. "They're filming hope. Every recovery here proves that darkness isn't permanent, that healing is possible if we just believe enough to try." The documentary would go on to win numerous awards and inspire similar programs worldwide. But for Sarah, the real achievement wasn't in the accolades or recognition. It was in the daily miracles that happened in their therapy paddock. Each small step forward, each moment of connection, each life transformed by the power of compassion and understanding. As winter's grip tightened on Vermont once again, Sarah found herself standing in the spot where she'd first found Midnight Frost. The horse stood beside her, strong and proud, no longer a victim, but a teacher, no longer broken, but a healer. "We've come so far," she whispered, stroking his neck, "but in some ways we're just beginning. There are so many others who need to learn what you've taught us, that healing isn't just about fixing what's broken, it's about discovering a strength you never knew you had." The documentary's final scene showed Midnight Frost leading a group of recovering horses through the snow. His own healed injury, a testament to the power of second chances. The image would become iconic, a symbol of hope for anyone facing their own journey of recovery. As the film crew packed up their equipment, Sarah realized that their story had become something larger than herself. Larger than Midnight Frost, larger even than their rehabilitation center. It had become a beacon of possibility, proving that sometimes the greatest healing comes not from avoiding brokenness, but from learning how to rise again, stronger and wiser, ready to help others find their way back to wholeness. The release of the documentary Rising from the Snow, the Midnight Frost Story, created ripples throughout both the equestrian and medical communities. But it was a phone call from Dr. Maya Chen, a pioneering neurologist specializing in spinal cord injuries, that would take their work in an unexpected direction. "Ms. Mitchell," Dr. Chen's voice crackled over the satellite phone, "I believe your methods could revolutionize human rehabilitation. Would you consider a collaboration with our research team at Stanford Medical Center?" The proposal was unprecedented, adapting their equine rehabilitation techniques for human patients with severe injuries. Dr. Chen had noticed something remarkable in the documentary footage. The way recovered horses, led by Midnight Frost, seemed to instinctively understand how to guide others through their healing journey. Traditional rehabilitation focuses solely on physical recovery, Dr. Chen explained during her visit to the center. But your approach, using recovered patients as guides, addresses the psychological barriers to healing in a way we've never seen before. Sarah watched as Midnight Frost demonstrated his gentle guidance with a newly injured horse, remembering her own experiences treating wounded soldiers. In combat medicine, we learned that healing isn't just about treating injuries, it's about restoring hope. The collaboration began with a pilot program, bringing spinal cord injury patients to work alongside recovering horses. The results were extraordinary. Patients who had plateaued in traditional therapy began making breakthrough progress when paired with animals who had overcome similar injuries. "It's like they understand each other," observed Dr. Harrison, documenting the interactions. "The horses show our patients that limitation isn't destiny, it's just a challenge to overcome." The success of the pilot program attracted attention from the military medical community. General Robert Hayes, head of the Veterans Medical Services, arrived personally to evaluate the potential for treating wounded warriors. "I've seen countless rehabilitation programs," the general said, watching a veteran work with midnight frost, "but never anything like this. There's something powerful about seeing an animal overcome the same challenges you're facing." As the program expanded, Sarah noticed Midnight Frost developing an uncanny ability to match injured horses with specific patients. He seemed to understand, instinctively, which partnerships would yield the best results for both species. One morning, a young soldier named Michael Torres arrived at the center. He had lost both legs to an IED in Afghanistan and had resisted traditional therapy. His doctors, running out of options, had sent him to Vermont as a last resort. "I don't need horse therapy," he declared bitterly from his wheelchair. "I need my legs back." But then something remarkable happened. Midnight Frost, without any prompting, approached Michael. The horse, bearing the scars of his own past trauma, simply stood beside the angry young soldier, offering silent companionship. "He gets it, doesn't he?" Michael said quietly after a long moment. "He knows what it's like to have everything taken away." Over the next few weeks, the documentary team returned to capture this new chapter in their story. They filmed as Michael began working with Midnight Frost, first from his wheelchair, then gradually learning to stand using prosthetics while the horse provided balance support. "It's not just about physical therapy," Michael explained to the cameras. "When you work with an animal that's overcome similar challenges, it shows you what's possible. They can't tell you it's going to be okay. They show you." The success of Michael's rehabilitation attracted attention from military hospitals worldwide. Sarah found herself traveling to Walter Reed Medical Center, teaching their staff how to integrate animal-assisted therapy into their recovery programs. Elizabeth, who had been studying the neurological aspects of their work, made a breakthrough discovery. The brain patterns of our patients when working with recovered horses show increased activity in regions associated with hope and motivation, she reported. "It's as if seeing an animal overcome similar injuries activates our own healing potential." The implications of their work continued to expand. Dr. Chen's research team documented how their methods could be adapted for various types of injuries and conditions. The Midnight Frost Protocol evolved into a comprehensive rehabilitation framework that bridged the gap between animal and human recovery. One afternoon, as Sarah watched Midnight Frost work with a group that included both injured horses and human patients, she realized they had created something that transcended traditional therapy. It was a model of healing that recognized the profound connection between species and the universal language of recovery. "You've discovered something revolutionary," Dr. Chen told her, reviewing the latest research data. "By combining physical rehabilitation with emotional healing, you're not just treating injuries, you're restoring whole beings." The center began offering training programs for medical professionals, teaching them how to integrate animal-assisted therapy into their practice. The sight of doctors and veterinarians learning side by side, sharing insights across species barriers, became commonplace. James Cooper, who had been establishing rehabilitation centers across Europe, reported similar success with their integrated approach. "We're seeing recovery rates that were once thought impossible," he shared during a video conference. "And it's not just the patients. The entire medical community is learning to think differently about healing." As their work gained recognition, Sarah received an invitation to speak at the World Health Organization's conference on innovative rehabilitation methods. Standing before an audience of medical professionals from around the globe, she shared their journey from saving one horse in a snowstorm to revolutionizing rehabilitation therapy. "What we've learned," she explained, "is that healing isn't limited by species. The fundamental principles of recovery, hope, perseverance, and the power of example are universal." The conference led to the establishment of the International Center for Integrated Rehabilitation, a facility dedicated to researching and implementing their methods worldwide. The center would serve as a training ground for both medical professionals and veterinarians, breaking down the traditional barriers between human and animal medicine. Back in Vermont, Sarah watched as Midnight Frost continued to work his magic with both human and animal patients. The horse who had once been abandoned in the snow had become a pioneer in a new frontier of healing. "He shows us that our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts," she told a group of visiting medical students. "When we heal ourselves, we gain the power to help others heal too." The documentary team's follow-up film, Healing Without Boundaries, captured this new chapter in their story. It showed how one horse's journey from victim to healer had sparked a revolution in how the world approached rehabilitation. As winter approached once again, Sarah stood in the therapy paddock with Shadow at her feet, watching Midnight Frost guide a session that included both injured horses and veterans. The sight of them working together, each species helping the other overcome their challenges, was a powerful testament to the universal nature of healing. "You've taught us something profound," she told Midnight Frost later that evening, as snow began to fall softly around them. "You've shown us that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers, and that healing isn't just about getting better. It's about becoming whole enough to help others find their way back to wholeness too." The snow continued to fall, but this time it didn't bring memories of abandonment and despair. Instead, it served as a reminder of how far they had come and how many lives they had touched along the way. Their story had become more than a tale of rescue and rehabilitation. It was a blueprint for a new understanding of healing, one that recognized the profound connection between all living beings and the extraordinary power of hope, compassion, and unwavering belief in the possibility of recovery. With their integrated rehabilitation model gaining worldwide recognition, Sarah's center faced its most challenging case yet. A devastating earthquake in Turkey had left hundreds of both humans and animals injured, and the Turkish government had specifically requested their expertise in establishing an emergency rehabilitation facility. "They need us there within 48 hours, Sarah explained to her team, looking at the urgent request. "They want to implement the Midnight Frost protocol for both human and animal victims of the disaster." The decision to take Midnight Frost overseas into a disaster zone wasn't easy. But the horse had proven time and again that his healing presence was most powerful in the most desperate situations. Shadow, though too elderly now for such a journey, seemed to give his approval with a gentle wag of his tail. Within hours, they had assembled a response team including Sarah, Elizabeth, Dr. Chen, and several trained rehabilitation specialists. A specially equipped transport plane waited to carry them and Midnight Frost to Turkey, where thousands of lives hung in the balance. "This isn't just about rehabilitation anymore," Elizabeth noted as they loaded their equipment. "We're about to test our methods in the most extreme conditions possible." The devastation they found in Turkey surpassed anything they had prepared for. The makeshift rehabilitation center was a converted sports stadium, filled with both human patients and injured animals. The sight of so much suffering was overwhelming, but Midnight Frost's calm presence seemed to immediately affect the atmosphere. "It's remarkable," Dr. Chen observed, watching the horse survey his new surroundings. "Even in chaos, he maintains that healing energy we've seen so many times before." Their first challenge came in the form of a young girl named Aylin, who had lost her beloved horse in the earthquake and hadn't spoken since being pulled from the rubble. She sat motionless in her wheelchair, unresponsive to traditional therapy. Attempts. Midnight Frost, displaying his uncanny intuition, approached Aylin carefully. The horse lowered his head to her level, his gentle presence offering silent understanding of her loss. To everyone's amazement, the girl slowly reached out to touch his nose. "Magnificent," whispered Dr. Chen, documenting the interaction. "He's creating a bridge between her trauma and healing." Over the next few weeks, their team worked tirelessly to implement their integrated rehabilitation model in the disaster. Zone. They trained local medical staff and veterinarians in their methods, showing them how the connection between human and animal healing could accelerate recovery for both species. The breakthrough came when they paired injured rescue dogs with human patients suffering from similar injuries. The sight of animals overcoming their wounds provided powerful motivation for human patients struggling with their own recovery. "Your methods are changing everything," the Turkish Minister of Health declared during a visit to the facility. "We're seeing recovery rates we never thought possible in disaster response." But it was Midnight Frost who continued to amaze everyone. The horse seemed to instinctively understand which patients, human or animal, needed his presence most. He would spend hours standing quietly beside those struggling with depression, or demonstrating gentle movements for those learning to walk again. One morning, they witnessed something extraordinary. Aylin, who hadn't walked since the earthquake, took her first steps while holding on to Midnight Frost's mane. The horse matched his pace perfectly to her tentative movements, providing both physical support and emotional encouragement. "This is beyond anything we've documented before," Dr. Chen said, reviewing the data. "The psychological impact of animal-assisted therapy in disaster recovery is rewriting everything we thought we knew about trauma healing." The success in Turkey attracted attention from disaster response organizations worldwide. The United Nations Emergency Response Division sent representatives to study their methods, recognizing the potential for improving recovery rates in future disasters. "What you've created here isn't just a rehabilitation protocol," the UN coordinator observed. "It's a new paradigm for disaster recovery that addresses both physical and emotional trauma simultaneously." As their mission in Turkey extended, Sarah noticed something remarkable about Midnight Frost. The horse who had once been abandoned in the snow had become a symbol of hope for an entire community. Children would visit him between therapy sessions, sharing their stories of survival, finding comfort in his steady presence. "He understands suffering," Aileen said one day, speaking her first full sentence since the earthquake. "But he also knows about getting better." The impact of their work spread beyond the rehabilitation center. Local families began adopting injured animals, creating their own versions of healing partnerships. The community that had been shattered by disaster was rebuilding itself through the power of compassionate connection. Elizabeth's research team documented everything, gathering data that would help establish protocols for future disaster response. They found that patients who participated in their integrated rehabilitation program showed significantly faster recovery rates than those receiving traditional therapy alone. "The key is the reciprocal healing relationship," Elizabeth explained. During a conference call with international medical teams, "When humans help animals heal and animals help humans heal, both species recover faster." As their time in Turkey drew to a close, they had trained enough local staff to continue their methods independently. The rehabilitation center had become a model for disaster recovery, combining the best of medical science with the profound healing power of human-animal connection. On their final day, the team witnessed a powerful moment. Aileen, now walking independently, led a therapy session for other children with Midnight Frost by her side. The horse, who had once been deemed worthless, was now helping rebuild lives on the other side of the world. "You see that?" Sarah asked Dr. Chen, watching the session. "That's the real miracle. Not just that they're healing, but that they're becoming healers themselves." The flight back to Vermont gave them time to reflect on how far their work had come. What had started as one woman's mission to save an abandoned horse had evolved into a global movement, transforming how the world approached healing in its most challenging contexts. Back at the center, Shadow greeted them with elderly enthusiasm, and Sarah noticed how Midnight Frost immediately resumed his duties with the local patients, as if he hadn't been away. The horse's capacity for healing seemed limitless. "We've learned something profound from this mission," Sarah told her team during their debrief. "When we break down the barriers between species, between rescuer and rescued, between healer and patient, we tap into something universal, the innate capacity for renewal that exists in all living beings." The Turkish mission became a catalyst for further evolution of their work. They began developing specialized protocols for disaster response, creating training programs for emergency rehabilitation teams worldwide. The Midnight Frost Protocol was now being adapted for everything from natural disasters to conflict zones. As winter approached once again in Vermont, Sarah stood in the therapy paddock, watching Midnight Frost work with a new group of patients. The horse's own journey from trauma to healing had become a blueprint for countless others, proving that the darkest moments could lead to the most profound transformations. "You've shown us something remarkable," she told him quietly, stroking his neck. "That healing isn't just about recovering from wounds, it's about discovering the healer within, no matter what species we are." The snow began to fall softly around them, but now it brought memories not of abandonment but of renewal. Each snowflake seemed to carry the promise of transformation, of hope, of the endless possibilities that emerge when compassion meets courage, and when the healing power of connection bridges all boundaries. As their work reached new heights of international recognition, Sarah faced an unexpected personal challenge. Shadow, her faithful companion through every step of their journey, was showing signs of his age. The veterinary diagnosis was clear. The elderly military dog had only months left. The news hit Sarah hard, bringing back memories of all the losses she'd witnessed in combat. But it was Midnight Frost's response that amazed everyone. The horse, sensing Shadow's declining health, began spending hours beside the old dog, offering the same gentle presence he showed injured patients. "He's returning the favor," Elizabeth observed, watching Midnight Frost lay down carefully next to Shadow in the sun. Shadow protected him when he was vulnerable. Now he's doing the same. Their bond inspired Sarah to establish a new program at the center, end-of-life care that combined animal companionship with palliative support for both humans and animals. The project quickly gained attention from hospice organizations worldwide. "What you're doing here isn't just about healing anymore," Dr. Chen noted during a visit. "You're showing us how to face life's final challenges with dignity and grace." The center began receiving requests from hospice centers wanting to integrate animal companions into their care programs. Midnight Frost, with his innate understanding of suffering and comfort, became a model for training therapy animals in palliative care. One morning, a remarkable thing happened. A group of terminal cancer patients from a nearby hospice visited the center. As they sat in the therapy paddock, sharing their fears and hopes, Midnight Frost moved among them with gentle purpose, offering silent comfort to each person. "He knows," one patient whispered, tears streaming down her face as the horse rested, his head gently on her shoulder. "He understands that sometimes healing isn't about getting better, it's about finding peace." Sarah watched these interactions with growing understanding. Their work had evolved beyond rehabilitation to encompass the full circle of life, helping both humans and animals face their greatest challenges with courage and companionship. Shadow's declining health brought an unexpected visitor, Catherine Wellington. The former adversary had heard about the dog's condition and arrived unannounced one snowy morning. "I've been following your work," she said quietly, watching. Shadow dozed in the winter sun, with Midnight Frost standing guard. "You've shown me how wrong I was about what gives life value." The reconciliation between former enemies added another dimension to their center's mission. Catherine began using her considerable resources to support their palliative care program, transforming her former competition stables into a sanctuary for aging and terminally ill horses. "Sometimes it takes facing the end to understand what truly matters," she reflected, working alongside Sarah to develop protocols for equine end-of-life care. "You and Midnight Frost taught me that every life has purpose, right until the very end." As winter deepened, Shadow's condition deteriorated, but his final days were filled with dignity and love, surrounded by the community he had helped build. Midnight Frost rarely left his side, maintaining a constant vigil over his old friend. The day Shadow passed, something extraordinary happened. Midnight Frost gathered the center's therapy animals, horses, dogs, and even a few rescued cats, around the old dog's favorite spot in the paddock. Together, they seemed to hold their own kind of memorial. "I've never seen anything like it," Dr. Harrison said, documenting the moment. "It's as if they understand the importance of honoring a life well lived." Sarah's grief was profound, but watching Midnight Frost lead this impromptu tribute to Shadow gave her a new perspective on loss and legacy. Their work had always been about more than just physical healing. It was about honoring the deep connections that gave life meaning. The center established the Shadow Memorial Program, dedicated to training therapy animals for end-of-life care. The program quickly became a model for hospice centers worldwide, showing how animal companionship could bring comfort and dignity to life's final journey. Midnight Frost's role evolved once again. The horse who had overcome abandonment and injury, who had helped countless others heal, now became a guide for both humans and animals facing their final challenges. His gentle presence brought peace to those struggling with fear and uncertainty. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, Sarah found Midnight Frost standing in Shadow's favorite spot in the paddock. The horse's quiet vigil spoke volumes about loyalty, love, and the bonds that transcended species. "You've taught us so much," she told him, joining his silent tribute, "about healing, about courage, and now about how to face loss with grace." The center's work continued to expand, but now with a deeper understanding of life's full circle. Their rehabilitation programs were enhanced by the wisdom gained from their palliative care experience, creating a more comprehensive approach to healing and support. International medical organizations began studying their model of integrated care, recognizing that the connections between humans and animals could bring comfort and meaning at every stage of life's journey. Elizabeth's research team documented the profound impact of animal companionship on terminal patients' quality of life. Their findings revolutionized how the medical community approached end-of-life care. "What we're seeing here," Dr. Chen reported, "during a medical conference is the power of connection to transform even life's most challenging moments into opportunities for growth and meaning." As spring approached, bringing new life to Vermont's hills, Sarah reflected on how their mission had evolved. What had started with saving one horse in a snowstorm had grown into a movement that touched every aspect of the human-animal bond, from healing and rehabilitation to comfort and compassion in life's final moments. Midnight Frost continued, his work with quiet dignity, somehow knowing exactly what each patient needed, whether it was encouragement to heal or comfort in facing the end. His own journey from abandoned champion to healing guide had come full circle. The legacy of Shadow lived on in every aspect of their program. His story, intertwined with Midnight Frost's, became a powerful reminder that every life had purpose and meaning, and that the connections we forge along the way were our greatest source of strength and comfort. As Sarah watched Midnight Frost guide a group of hospice patients through a gentle therapy session, she understood that their work had revealed something profound about the nature of healing itself. It wasn't just about fixing what was broken. It was about finding meaning in every moment, whether in recovery or release. The snow that had once represented abandonment and despair now symbolized something different. The quiet beauty of life's natural cycles, the peace that came with acceptance, and the enduring power of love to transform even our deepest challenges into opportunities for grace. Their story had become more than a tale of rescue and rehabilitation. It was a testament to the extraordinary capacity of all living beings to give and receive comfort, to find purpose in pain, and to transform the darkest moments into sources of light for others. 10 years had passed since that fateful night when Sarah found Midnight Frost abandoned in the snow. The rehabilitation center had grown into an international institution with satellite facilities on every continent. But on this particular spring morning, Sarah sensed something different in the air as she watched Midnight Frost in the therapy paddock. The once abandoned champion, now in his later years, moved with the same grace that had marked his entire journey from patient to healer. His dark coat, now touched with silver around his muzzle, still gleamed in the morning light as he worked with a group of young therapy horses, teaching them the gentle art of healing others. "He's created his own legacy," Elizabeth remarked, joining Sarah at the fence. They watched as Midnight Frost demonstrated to his young protégés how to support an injured patient, his movements deliberate and purposeful. The United Nations had recently recognized their center with their highest humanitarian award, acknowledging how their work had transformed rehabilitation and palliative care worldwide. But the true measure of their success wasn't in awards or accolades. It was in the countless lives touched by their approach to healing. That morning, they received news that would mark the beginning of their next chapter. The International Olympic Committee had made a groundbreaking announcement. Every major equestrian event would now require the presence of a rehabilitation team trained in the Midnight Frost protocol. "It's official," Dr. Harrison said, sharing the news. "The sport that once discarded injured champions will now protect and rehabilitate them. The cycle of abandonment ends here." As they celebrated this victory, Sarah noticed Midnight Frost leading his group of young horses to Shadow's Memorial Garden, a peaceful spot where therapy animals now trained to provide end-of-life comfort. The sight sparked an idea that would become their most ambitious project yet. "We need to ensure this knowledge isn't lost," Sarah announced to her team. "It's time to create the Academy of Healing Arts, a school that will train the next generation of both human and animal healers." The concept was revolutionary. A teaching institution where veterinarians, doctors, therapists, and animals would learn together, breaking down the traditional barriers between species and disciplines. Midnight Frost would serve as the living embodiment of their philosophy, showing how personal trauma could be transformed into healing wisdom. Construction began on the new academy buildings as spring turned to summer. The design incorporated everything they'd learned about creating: spaces that promoted healing, natural light, open areas for interaction, and special facilities where animals and humans could work together in harmony. During this time, Catherine Wellington made her final contribution to their work. Before retiring, she transformed her entire racing empire into a network of rehabilitation centers, each one operating under the principles she had once fought against. "My life's work was building champions," she said during the Academy's groundbreaking ceremony. "But Sarah and Midnight Frost showed me that true championship isn't about winning races, it's about helping others cross their own finish lines." The first class of Academy students arrived in the fall, a diverse group from around the world, each drawn by the promise of learning a new way of healing. They watched in awe as Midnight Frost, the living legend they'd heard so much about, demonstrated the subtle art of connecting with injured souls. "Notice how he knows exactly what each patient needs," Sarah explained to the students. "That's not just instinct, it's wisdom earned through his own journey from victim to healer." The Academy's curriculum was unlike any other in the world. Students learned not just medical techniques, but the deeper principles of healing that Midnight Frost had taught them: patience, presence, and the power of unconditional support. As winter approached again, Sarah found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet moments when Midnight Frost worked with his young protégés. The horse, who had once been deemed worthless, was ensuring his methods would live on through the next generation. "You've created something eternal," she told him one evening, watching as he gently guided a young therapy horse through a rehabilitation exercise. "Your story will continue to heal long after we're gone." The Academy's first year brought remarkable breakthroughs in understanding the connection between human and animal healing. Research teams documented how animals who had overcome trauma could intuitively guide others through similar challenges, creating a new field of study they called experiential healing transmission. One morning, as snow began to fall, Sarah received a letter that brought her journey full circle. It was from Marcus, the former Wellington Academy trainer who had been forced to abandon Midnight Frost all those years ago. "I've spent years trying to make amends," he wrote, "but watching how you transformed that night of abandonment into a worldwide movement for healing, it's shown me that sometimes our greatest mistakes can lead to the most profound redemption." The letter inspired a new addition to their program, the Redemption Project, designed to help those in the equestrian industry who wanted to transition from competition-focused training to rehabilitation work. Midnight Frost, with his extraordinary capacity for forgiveness, became a symbol of transformation for trainers seeking to change their approach. As the Academy flourished, Sarah noticed something remarkable about Midnight Frost's teaching style. He seemed to be deliberately stepping back, allowing his trained protégés to take more active roles in therapy sessions, ensuring the continuity of their work. "He's not just teaching them techniques," Dr. Chen observed. "He's showing them how to become teachers themselves. It's the ultimate form of healing, empowering others to carry the work forward." The Academy's impact extended far beyond its walls. Graduates began establishing their own centers worldwide, each one adapting the Midnight Frost protocol to their local needs while maintaining its core principles of compassion, patience, and belief in the healing power of connection. One snowy evening, exactly 10 years after that fateful night of rescue, Sarah stood with Midnight Frost in the exact spot where she had found him. The horse who had once lay abandoned in the snow now stood proud and strong, his legacy secured. In the hundreds of healers, both human and animal, he had helped train. "You've shown us that rock bottom isn't an ending," she told him, her voice soft with emotion. "It's where we discover our true purpose." As if in response, Midnight Frost turned to watch a group of young therapy horses working with new patients in the paddock. His protégés moved with the same gentle confidence he had taught them, carrying forward the healing wisdom he had gained through his own journey from darkness to light. The snow fell softly around them, no longer a reminder of abandonment, but a symbol of how life's darkest moments could be transformed into sources of light for others. Their story had become more than a tale of rescue and rehabilitation. It was a testament to the extraordinary potential that lies within every broken spirit, waiting to be transformed into a force for healing. The Academy of Healing Arts stood as a living monument to this truth, a place where future generations would learn that the greatest healing comes not from avoiding brokenness, but from transforming it into wisdom that could light the way for others. And at its heart, the spirit of Midnight Frost would continue to teach its timeless lesson, that sometimes the most profound healing comes from learning how to help others heal. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.